Hello, everyone. Welcome to our Disco webinar. And I am Candice Faktor, co-founder and CEO of Disco, the AI-first learning platform built to run and scale transformative learning experiences. We combine AI, community, and learning with modern design. And I am so delighted to have two incredible women with me as my guests today. The amazing Deborah Quazzo, who need no introduction, likely, to many of you. Deborah is the managing partner of GSV Ventures, the leading venture firm investing in the future of learning and work. Deborah has decades of experience at the intersection of education and innovation. And she is also a founder of the ASU GSV Summit, which is taking place next month. I am lucky because Deborah actually sits on the Disco board and is an investor in Disco. So welcome, Deborah. It's wonderful to have you.
Thank you, Candice. I'm thrilled to be here.
Awesome. And certainly it is equally as amazing to have Claire Zau. Claire is a partner and is the AI lead at GSV Ventures, and she is a force to be reckoned with. She sits at the intersection of all things AI, driven learning, workforce development, and the future of education. And honestly, she's absolutely brilliant. So I am so lucky that we have you here as well. Welcome, Claire.
Thank you so much, Candice. So excited to be here.
Awesome. We want to make this as interactive for everybody. So please ask questions as we go along, and we'll make sure we get to them. We have 30 minutes with Claire and Deborah, and I think we should just start by saying you guys have had this incredible behind the scenes look at the evolving AI and education landscape, given all the work you've done at GSV Ventures. In your perspective, what are the truly transformative applications you're seeing of AI in education right now?
All right, Claire, I'm going to let you go first. Yeah, I think for us, we're seeing obviously a lot of wrappers around what technology that these frontier labs are pushing out. But I think for us at core principles, whether or not you're building AI or not, it's always down to who can actually build a great product layer around that technology and what you do with that technology. I think a lot of people are pushing out chatbots. We're seeing a lot of chatbot fatigue and AI for the sake of AI. I would say that's a little bit overhyped. However, I think some of the smarter companies are actually doing a lot of really interesting things on a couple of fronts. I think one on multimodality. I think just thinking through giving AI information that we've never been able to give it contextual information before. Going beyond that chatbot functionality and giving it audio data, visual data, image data, that gives so much more information to AI to make it that much smarter and much more contextualized and personalized to your setting. Another big thing I think is just with the launch of things like computer use, what happens when AI moves from not just helping you assist and helping you generate information to actually helping you move from data and generation of information to actually doing it for you, actually completing full end-to-end workflows on your behalf. I think that's a really exciting question, and I'm sure we'll dive deep into those, what that looks like in L&D.
I love that. And I love that you mentioned the multimodality and the agents and the stuff that's overhyped too, right? Which is, there's a lot of noise out there. So thank you for that. Deborah, what about you?
Yeah, I think that, and I obviously agree with Claire. I think that we're excited on the video front. We have both the CEOs of Synthesia and HeyGen coming to ASU GSV in April. It's fascinating. Synthesia is a bigger, broad, horizontal. The both are really video play in the AI-led space, but actually the first application, and I know where Claire in fact saw it in its very early iterations as we were working on the summit, was in the L&D space. The L&D leaders were really some of the first to adopt Synthesia as a product. It's now quite a big company, but it's fascinating to us as we're looking at a lot of horizontal players either saw early on that learning was a critical path for them, or folks like OpenAI today has now built up quite a large education practice beyond L&D, but also K-12 and higher ed, seeing incredible applications within horizontal players for the education vertical, which is a huge vertical at the end of the day. Yeah, I think we are very excited about the multimodal activity, the sort of advent of the agentic world. I hope that doesn't we all get a little agentic fatigue, but I'm actually looking forward to
to really being able to use Perplexity and have them actually do my tasks for me. So I think it truly, you can talk about hype, but I'm not sure there's not, I think it's not, I'm not convinced there's a lot of hype anymore. I think that the reality is, as we've been saying, AI is air, it's everywhere, it's pervasive. It's I laughed back in the 2000s, the investment banks used to have internet groups as if the internet was going to be a vertical as opposed to a horizontal. And that's where we got very quickly with AI. Yeah, so it's exciting. I think the other thing we've seen in our portfolio companies, both in the US and India, is dramatic transformation of cost bases. Companies that have gone in, completely changed the way they produce content, completely changed the way they interact with their customers, completely changed the way they do admin tasks, right? It's like RPA on steroids. And we've seen very dramatic change. And I think we're really in the first inning of that in the cost structure and the operating leverage of a lot of companies. So in a world where moving to profitability and growth with profitability is job one for everybody in the startup world, it's this tool could not have, it's hardly a tool, but this science could not have had better timing. And it's been a pretty remark for the companies that have been very smart about it. The change in the operating leverage dynamics are breathtaking.
Thank you for bringing that up. What I'm hearing, and just to echo, multimodal, I think the Synthesia and HeyGens, even we're seeing in our Disco academies, like we have embeds, right, from Synthesia and HeyGen. It's an interesting one where people are using this to create their curriculums even inside Disco
That's
today.
right.
So it's wonderful to see how it really changes the way you can do this. And that's really, we have 50% of the people on this call are learning businesses, and they're looking at AI as a way to think about changing the economics of how they operate. And so I'd love to drill in a little bit more on what you're saying, Deborah, because that's really what Disco's value proposition is as well, is that we're here to help you bring some of this tooling to make it that much easier to operate, both saving you time and resources with a variety of different tools. The companies that you've seen deliver against this to actually take that cost out, what are they doing? What are they using? And what have some of the remarkable results been?
Claire, you want to jump in first on that one?
Yeah. So obviously, I think internally there's a whole suite of tools that companies are now using to build that operating leverage, as you mentioned, just the cost structure and the cost basis of creating content, of even just having agents run customer service. Mm-hmm. One of the prime examples is Klarna, I think, cutting anywhere from 70 to 90% of their customer service workforce because they can now leverage AI agents to answer the 100 most common questions that, as I'm sure any of these businesses that are in the audience, you get, and then have real humans address the more higher level thinking questions that might need a little bit more creative and critical thinking involved. So definitely seeing a lot of that internally. As it relates to externally and the options and features that people are pushing towards their users, I think there's a big emphasis on how AI enables this second brain and this idea that for the first time ever, you have this ability to no longer have knowledge loss and knowledge drain, especially when, for example, different employees leave the org, or even just the communication between different employees in the organization. You now have this system that can capture everything from tacit knowledge, documents. So I think being able to embed that into any platform. And as I mentioned, just on the multimodality, it's not even just about creating visual and audio information. I think it's also about what you can do when you can collect video and audio data. Really excited about what we're seeing on the assessment front across pre-K to grade. But in the workforce world, in the same way that in a lot of K-12, our existing ways of assessing people have historically been multiple choice questions, tests even, or surveys, right? These are not very good ways of collecting data on how well a person is doing. I think some of the things that we're most excited about are companies that are embedding ways to kind of invisibly assess people in the background. And with that data, whether that, turn that into just-in-time learning and just-in-time feedback. I think one of the best examples of this is in the digital world, you have platforms like Gong and Chorus, where as sales reps are going through their real calls, they get feedback on how they're doing, and they can get that real-time feedback as opposed to a performance review at the end of the month. In the physical world, you're even seeing manifestations of this in the form of platforms like Squint, where you have AR systems that are able to observe how people are working on manufacturing and retail floors and give them feedback on how they can actually move from instruction manual to physical work. So I think this idea that it's not only about us generating more video and audio information, but also taking audio and video from our working spaces and turning that into helpful data and feedback.
I think that's such an important point. And we're going to jump into that in a second, which is really about these AI first learning modalities. But I just want to hone in a bit more on the operation side, right? If you were to quantify for learning businesses where they can and should be saving resources and time the most, I know from a Disco perspective, we think, for example, content generation, curriculum generation, assessments, all of this is saving, like we're seeing massive savings from some of our learning business customers. Is there any data that you have at GSV around where the economics are changing the most for learning businesses?
I think it's probably too early to have real data on, and everything is, I won't say bespoke, but I think the application is different at Coursera than it is at pick another company. So I think we're early, Candice, on getting those numbers, but I would say the opportunity for a higher EBITDA operating margin in general for the space is, I think, a prospect that we should be able to look at in the next 2 to 4 years as people wade their way through. Because obviously there's often an investment required as well. So there are countervailing pressures. The other point on, and we're seeing this with our largest investment actually in the fund, and a company in India called PhysicsWallah, which operates across pre-K to grade. So it's K-12, higher ed, and workforce. What they've been able, and they're a massively scaled company. The other thing you're going to see is scale at the top, which drives higher margin as well, right? So they're using AI in numerous ways to create more personalization for courses that are on YouTube or whatever platform, but which have tens of thousands of students, right? So doing a course with tens of thousands of students on YouTube is really hard to make you feel like you're getting a unique and personalized experience. And they had done that remarkably historically through sheer power of personality, I would say. But what they're now doing and will increasingly do is make you have that one-to-one. That's the holy grail we've been talking about forever in education, right? Is how is this quote, this elusive personalization quest. But I do think you're going to begin to see companies be able to educate much larger cohorts of people at scale, while still delivering a highly personalized outcome. Whether it's, to Claire's point, we're very excited in the assessment area. We think assessment's becoming more important than ever because things are more dynamic than ever. The static nature of skills and everything is pretty much eliminated. So all those elements, if you can go in and personalize all those things and still deliver a course to, 1,000 people, 50,000 people, whatever, 1 million people, I think that's also intriguing. Which can clearly drive another positive impact to operating margin in the long run. So I don't, Claire, unless you've got something I don't know about. I don't think we're sitting in a place where we know precisely, but we're very optimistic about it.
I totally agree. Where I think we don't have that data yet. We do have early signals. So I think Anthropic just released their economic index, which basically they tracked AI usage and integration in day-to-day work across different occupations and anonymized the Claude chats to understand how they were using Claude. And I think what they found, and there's not great granular data on specifically what people are doing, but they found that 36% of occupations use AI for at least a quarter of their tasks. And that of the AI usage, about 60% is used to augment human capabilities and 43% is on purely automation. So for now, the majority of it is actually on enhancing productivity and augmenting as opposed to full replacement of tasks.
That's really helpful.
And I see marketing is the other area, of course, that we're seeing huge changes. Everybody is. So.
Content generation, for sure. What's really interesting hearing you speak is AI is fundamentally changing how people learn and what the expectation is when it comes to learning. So we talk about personalization now becoming just an expectation. I expect things to be personalized. I expect things to be conversational. I think, Claire, you mentioned a study in your weekly roundup, which everybody should subscribe to because it's so good. About a third of college students just use ChatGPT now. And the question becomes, as both a CLO or workforce learning leader or a learning business, what do you think are going to be the next shifts in learning modalities and learning experiences that young people are just going to expect from their learning platforms?
I do think everything you mentioned around the multimodal nature of their learning, I think people are no longer going to sit with compliance videos, just watching a video online and passively getting quizzed on it later. I think also people are going to really want more data interoperability across all the systems that they're interacting with. So I think a lot of our workplace tools don't talk to each other. For enterprise employees, teachers, everybody that interacts with software, there's at least 100 to 200 tools that you interface with in your digital workspace. And the idea that data doesn't talk to each other makes it a lot harder. There's a lot of moving between different platforms. And so I think the future users are going to expect some sort of interoperability across those systems. And ideally, those AI systems are able to seamlessly navigate across, hopefully in an agentic form. Another thing I might call out is also a really good video to watch with the most recent DoorDash interview of Satya Nadella. He makes this really clear distinction between cognitive labor and future cognitive tasks. And cognitive labor is just a task that humans currently perform. That's problem solving, decision making. But we're also doing a lot of that in the form of drafting reports, writing emails right now. And that layer will obviously become a cognitive task that AI can take over. However, I think how we should probably think about future skills and what future people are going to evolve into is really that the scope of cognitive labor will expand. It'll be much more about humans guiding AI systems, managing outcomes, steering direction of tech advancement, as opposed to humans completely being removed from the equation.
Well, in some ways that would argue it gives you some anxiety when you think about the downstream learning systems. I think it raises the question of people are going to need to be smarter and better, perhaps, than they are and today, and how do the skills gaps that exist in a very broad way translate into this new work environment, and how do AI-driven learning systems, frankly, help people catch up? Because I think if you look at the data coming out of K-12 and higher ed, and obviously 70% of people in the U.S. are college educated, 70% are not college educated,
Right.
30 are. And both systems have their issues. And certainly the recent academic results in the US from the test, which showed some pretty dire outcomes, like 30% reading and math proficiency for public school students across the board. So there's also this interesting dynamic, and some of it's hangover from COVID, some of it's continued system failure, but what does it mean when the gen, whatever that's sitting there now, hits the workforce? And
Exactly.
what pressure is that? And can AI help? Because what I would say is if that generation was going to hit the workforce anyway without generative AI happening, and it was going to require a lot of what had been traditional learning provisions, skilling provisions, that sort of thing. So I think it's an interesting dynamic. As on the one hand, we read about this increasing level of sophistication in learning the whole all the issues of what is cognitive delivery and how does it expand, and what is going to be required of humans. It's just, to me, really interesting and important pressure that's going to be put on CLOs and enterprises as they meet the incoming generation of college and high school graduates who faced a little bit of, have had different experiences over the last, 8 years then, or more than the previous generations. Yeah, it's going to be, it's ripe. It's certainly rife with opportunity and challenges, but I think it hopefully is a great opportunity to accelerate. We talk about learning at the speed of light and an acceleration of learning in ways that we've never had before, and we're going to need it.
And is your take, I was actually chatting with another fund who's very just focused on AI, and his take was this next generation is actually going to be far more equipped because they have had this agentic support, right, with Gen AI to be able to upskill and learn. And so is yours optimistic or pessimistic or a combo of both? And how do platforms that are focused on learning really meet the gap here? What do you think they need to do?
Good news. And I think folks get a little naive about access, right? Students in K-12 education in the US do not have access in the way that folks in more sophisticated positions appreciate. And I think that we need to make sure. So I think there are a lot of folks on the ground fighting to make sure that the K-12 system, that children broadly, students broadly, across all socioeconomic, levels have access. And the good news, what I kind of love is we can capture it. The good news is that the coding era was great, and it was a wonderful objective, and it was bravo to all the people who did incredible work, code.org and others. The reality was that was not an accessible. Coding is not something everybody's going to want to do. And my mom was never going to go code Python. She loves AI. So and I think that's
much more universal.
That's true of teachers, that's true of students. So I think the good news is it's a far more accessible technology. So I think hopefully the person you're talking to is dead right. We just need to make sure that
And I think that's
the
a very good
access
point.
is pervasive. Yeah.
Yes. No, I think that's great. So we have a few minutes left, and we have the ASU GSV Summit coming up. And it really is the go-to summit for all things education and workforce learning and AI. If we're sitting down at ASU GSV next year, what do you think is going to be the biggest AI-related topics in the conversation?
Right. Go, Claire.
Oh, this is a good question. I think we're largely going to move away around what are LLMs, what is XYZ technology, and really thinking about the second order effects of the technology itself. I think a lot more emphasis on metacognition. If we're embedding AI in the workforce and people are now trained to be managers of this army of AI agents, how do you actually train the human to validate AI's work? If they're now much more in a role of saying this AI did well or not, but they haven't done the work of being that entry-level person doing the more manual work, how can they validate whether or not something's good or not? So I think a lot of questions around that combination of metacognition, how do you assess and validate AI's work as a human manager in combination with the tech advancements around computer use and agentic AI becoming much more part of the workforce. I think there will be a lot of broader questions, I think, trending around AGI and what happens when, your cost of intelligence is going down, but that unit of intelligence itself is scaling at a speed that we've never seen before. If AI systems can now reason and pull, deep research reports better than a human can, just thinking broadly about how we structure our workforce, what do our future org structures look like? I think those will be more relevant questions in a more tangible. I'm moving those questions from theoretical, which I'm sure currently we're making predictions for 5 to 10 years out, to actually putting in place workforce plans, thinking about very clear ways to implement this in our org structures.